was 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday when 3 squad cars screeched into the parking lot of my restaurant, Basil and Bone, sirens blaring and lights flashing like we were harboring some kind of fugitive. Officer Mendez burst through the front doors with his hand hovering over his weapon, yelling "Where's the hostage?" in a voice that made my dinner crowd scream and duck under their tables. The only person standing calmly in the middle of all this chaos was Marlene Crutchfield, the HOA president of Elderberry Point, pointing at me behind the counter and screaming that man refused to serve me. I have rights. And that's how I, Todd Myers, found myself nearly arrested for not giving away a $17 grilled sea bass with chimichurri sauce. Let me back up a bit. I had a simple life philosophy when I moved to this suburban paradise. Cook well, mow often, and don't get involved in neighborhood drama. I relocated to Elderberry Point, a cookie-cutter gated community outside Savannah, Georgia, specifically for the peace and the yard space. When I opened Basil and Bone, a quiet bistro just 3 blocks from my home, I genuinely thought I had found suburban bliss. The restaurant was doing well, my lawn was immaculate, and I even had time for weekend golf. But I hadn't accounted for Marlene Crutchfield in my life plans. She was the HOA president, a former cruise director who had apparently decided retirement meant terrorizing the neighborhood with the same energy she once used to organize shuffleboard tournaments. Currently retired and weaponizing her clipboard like it was some kind of medieval weapon, she ruled our subdivision with an iron fist wrapped in a bedazzled golf glove. Her signature look consisted of a rhinestone-encrusted visor, a golf cart equipped with what she claimed were emergency lights but looked suspiciously like she had stolen them from a mall security vehicle, and a little chihuahua named Skittles that she insisted was a service animal despite the fact it wore a pink tutu and spent most of its time barking at leaves. She took one look at my clean lawn and successful restaurant and apparently decided I had committed the ultimate HOA crime. I wasn't under her control. I paid my dues on time, kept my property pristine, and worst of all, I didn't need her approval for anything. This, it seemed, was unacceptable. The harassment started with little things that seemed almost laughable at first. I received a formal letter from the HOA claiming my front porch basil plant was, quote, agriculturally aggressive, unquote, and needed to be removed immediately. A second notice arrived 2 days later about my mailbox color being, quote, too Mediterranean, unquote, for the approved neighborhood aesthetic. Then came what Marlene called the audits, which were really just her parading up and down my street with that clipboard, snapping photos of my recycling bin placement like she was documenting evidence for a federal case. She would make passive-aggressive comments about my, quote, non-regulation mulch choice, unquote, loud enough for all the neighbors to hear. I tried to be neighborly about it all. I smiled, waved, even offered her fresh herbs for my supposedly aggressive basil plant. But then, like a vulture circling a wounded gazelle, she began showing up at Basil and Bone. The first time, she walked in during our lunch rush, demanded the best table, and when presented with a check, she laughed and said she never paid at local establishments. She claimed her position as HOA president came with, quote, community perks, unquote, and that giving her free meals was the least I could do for all the positive neighborhood exposure she could provide. I politely explained that we didn't offer those kinds of perks and that everyone was welcome to enjoy our food at the listed prices. She left in a huff, but not before leaving a 1-star Yelp review titled, quote, disrespectful chef disrespects our entire subdivision, unquote. The review claimed I had personally insulted every homeowner in Elderberry Point by refusing to honor the HOA discount that didn't exist. This became her routine. She would show up once or twice a week, always during our busiest times, always demanding free food in exchange for her, quote, valuable community connections, unquote. Each time I politely declined, she would escalate. She brought her entire book club once, promising them all free appetizers. She told my servers I had personally approved complimentary wine for her bridge group. She even tried to host an HOA meeting in my private dining room without making a reservation, insisting it was her right as president to commandeer any local business for official purposes. I remained professional through it all, but I could see she was getting more frustrated with each failed attempt. My staff started calling her the free food phantom behind her back, and we had a running bet on what excuse she would use next. Little did we know she was planning something much bigger. The night of the incident started like any other Thursday. We were running a special on grilled sea bass with chimichurri, $17, and the dining room was pleasantly full. Around 6:30, Marlene strutted in wearing what looked like her formal HOA visor, the one with extra rhinestones, and marched straight to the host stand. She announced loudly enough for everyone to hear that she was here for her complimentary meal as discussed with the owner. My hostess, bless her heart, had been thoroughly trained for this exact situation and politely informed Marlene that she would need to pay like any other customer. Marlene's face turned the color of our house special marinara sauce. She demanded to speak with me immediately. I came out from the kitchen, wiping my hands on my apron, and calmly explained once again that we didn't offer free meals to HOA board members. She then played what she clearly thought was her trump card, claiming she had severe dietary restrictions and that refusing to accommodate her was discrimination. I pointed to our extensive menu that clearly marked gluten-free, dairy-free, and vegan options, all available for purchase. That's when she said it. "You'll regret this, Todd Myers. You'll regret the day you crossed Marlene Crutchfield." Then she stormed out, her chihuahua yapping in her designer purse, and I thought that was the end of it. I should have known better. 17 minutes later, the police arrived in force. According to the 911 call, which I later heard during the investigation, Marlene had claimed that a local business owner was holding a senior citizen hostage over a gluten-free request. She said I was discriminating against her due to her HOA status and dietary restrictions, and that she feared for her safety. She actually used the words hostile situation and potential violence. The scene was absolute chaos. Customers were evacuated, my staff was questioned, and I spent 45 minutes explaining to increasingly confused police officers that the only crime being committed was Marlene's attempt to pay for a $17 fish dinner with expired Kohl's cash. Officer Mendez, who had initially burst in ready for action, actually laughed when he realized what had happened. His partner was less amused, especially when they discovered this wasn't Marlene's first false emergency call. After the officers left with profuse apologies and free coffee to go, I had officially had enough. This woman had disrupted my business, terrified my customers, and wasted valuable emergency resources. I went home that night and did something I had never done before. I decided to fight back. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the police department for harassment and abuse of emergency services. I also contacted a lawyer friend who specialized in HOA disputes. Then came the surprise that changed everything. It turned out Marlene had done this exact same thing before. Twice, actually. Once at a Panera Bread where she claimed they were holding her purse hostage when they wouldn't accept an expired coupon. Another time at a Petco where she called 911 saying the staff was abusing her emotional support animal when they wouldn't groom Skittles for free. But this time was different. This time, everything was on camera. We had security footage of her entering calm and leaving angry. We had witness statements from 17 customers. We had the Yelp messages where she explicitly threatened to, quote, destroy my business, unquote, if I didn't cave to her demands. The officers took it seriously this time. The city took it even more seriously. 2 weeks later, the investigation had expanded beyond just the false police report. A formal audit was launched into the Elderberry Point HOA's financial records and use of authority. As it turned out, Marlene had been treating the HOA like her personal kingdom, and the kingdom's coffers like her personal piggy bank. Investigators found she had been funneling HOA funds into suspicious categories like, quote, property beautification, unquote, that coincidentally only beautified her property. There was a $20,000 account labeled Pet Spa Emergency Fund that seemed to only benefit Skittles. She had even used HOA money to pay for her personal driveway to be power washed weekly. The HOA board, who had been too intimidated by Marlene's iron fist rule to act before, suddenly found their courage when presented with evidence of her embezzlement. They called an emergency meeting on a Tuesday morning, deliberately scheduling it when Marlene was at her standing hair appointment. She had assumed it was going to be about planning the annual HOA brunch. Instead, they voted her out unanimously in absentia. The beautiful irony was that they asked me to cater the meeting. I served sea bass with chimichurri. I charged double, and they happily paid every penny. When Marlene found out what had happened while she was getting her highlights touched up, she tried to storm the meeting, but it was already over. The new acting president, retired Judge Yolanda Gates, had already changed the locks on the HOA office and begun the process of pressing criminal charges. Marlene stood in the parking lot, screaming about coups and conspiracies while Skittles barked at passing cars. The justice system moved faster than I expected. Within 3 weeks, Marlene was formally charged with filing a false police report, a misdemeanor that carried potential jail time. She was also charged with embezzlement of HOA funds, which was a felony given the amount involved. The city added charges of misuse of emergency services for her multiple false 911 calls. But the real shock came when animal control got involved. After seeing Skittles during the investigation, they demanded to see the service animal certification Marlene had been flashing around town. Not only was the certificate fake, ordered from some sketchy website, but Skittles wasn't even what Marlene claimed. A mandatory DNA test, required for all registered service animals in our county, revealed that Skittles wasn't a Chihuahua at all but was, and I quote the official report, a mixed breed of unknown origin possibly containing ferret genetic markers. The culmination of everything came 6 weeks after the infamous C-Base incident. The courtroom was packed with Elderberry Point residents, many of whom had their own stories of Marlene's abuse of power. Former HOA board members testified about her intimidation tactics. 3 restaurant owners from around town shared their own stories of her demanding free meals. The Panera Bread manager actually brought security footage of her previous false 911 call. My testimony was simple and factual. I played the security footage from that night, showed the Yelp reviews and messages, and presented the receipts from all the times she had tried to scam free food. Judge Yolanda Gates, who had taken over as HOA president and recused herself from the case for obvious reasons, watched from the gallery with what I can only describe as barely contained satisfaction. The verdict was swift and harsh. Marlene was found guilty on all counts. For the false police report and misuse of emergency services, she received 6 months in county jail, suspended to probation with 200 hours of community service specifically at local restaurants, where she would have to wash dishes. The embezzlement charges carried a heavier penalty of 2 years in minimum security prison, with a possibility of early release after 1 year. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, a sum of $47,000, plus fines to the city totaling another $15,000. But the part that seemed to hurt her the most was the lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board in the state and a restraining order preventing her from coming within 100 feet of any restaurant in Elderberry Point, including mine. She also had to surrender Skittles to animal control for proper identification and registration. When the judge read the sentence, Marlene's face went through every shade of red in the spectrum. She actually stood up and screamed that we would all regret this, that she had powerful friends, that her cousin was a lawyer in Atlanta. The judge added another 30 days for contempt of court. As the bailiffs led her away, she was still yelling about discrimination and her rights, her bedazzled visor crooked on her head, her reign of HOA terror finally over.